Welcome to Webster Now with your host, Garrett Wagner.
If you walked in the town board meeting this past week, one thing was immediately clear. People, it's all of you, you're paying attention. The biggest takeaway? It's quite obvious. There was over 2 hours of public comments alone, with residents lining up, speaking out, pushing back against development, solar, cell towers, but also on the process itself. And here's the question that's been sticking with me ever since this board meeting. What happens when public participation is slowing things down, but decisions don't seem to slow down in response? And tonight, we're going to dig into that just uncomfortable tension that's going on right now. On one hand, you've got a surge in civic engagement, people asking better questions, wanting more clarity, and taking the time to understand what's happening in their town because they care, you care. On the other hand, you've got decisions that don't always appear to be moved at the same pace. And man, are those two colliding hard. And something's got to give eventually. We're to look at what that means in practice, including a moment where board members voted on something they hadn't read yet. Yeah, that happened. Then we're going to zoom out and ask what the standards should be when decisions are made that impact the entire town that we live in. And finally, we'll walk through one of the biggest ongoing projects in Webster right now and let you decide. Is this moving too fast or exactly as it should be? We'll also clear up some confusion around the Verizon tower going to the Mill Creek area and end with something a little lighter because Webster, it's finally springtime. We deserve it after this long winter. Just a quick reminder, everything you hear today is my perspective only. Nothing here said reflects official town policy or action. So let's get into it. Starting with what we all just witnessed, because it matters. This wasn't a typical town board meeting. It was over 2 hours of public comment that was sustained, focused, honest, and honestly, for all of you, it was remarkable. It was remarkable watching all of you show up and speak out. You had residents speaking on the moratorium and asking for more time. Other residents raised concerns about the solar project, cell towers, development density, and then there was another layer of comments, not just about what was being decided, but how those decisions are being made. People were getting up raising concerns about process, sequencing, legal exposure. You heard terms like seeker, lawsuits, environmental review, sound studies, things you don't really hear at that volume and that mass in a single night. And if you were in the room or even just watching, you felt it, hands down. Because this feels different. Because people are showing up like never before in Webster, and some of you are concerned.
The residents of Webster are watching and are counting on this board to protect the community they love. Once land is developed, those decisions are largely irreversible. A moratorium is not anti-growth, it is responsible governance.
I'm choosing to speak this evening to encourage that thoughtful, ethical, and compassionate consideration be at the foreground of future decision-making regarding the solar farm proposal.
Have we done our due diligence to ensure that this project is good for the health, safety, and welfare of our Webster residents?
The planning board did not do due diligence regarding this issue.
Clear-cutting this amount of land will displace wildlife, including deer, foxes, rabbits, and other species that inhabit the area. It may also disrupt natural drainage patterns that affect surrounding properties.
It is the opinion of numerous Webster residents that the issues and concerns largely outweigh the benefits.
This cell tower location is really directly in my backyard, right in a natural wooded area. As you guys know, many years ago, the town board approved the name of the street as Scenic Circle for a very obvious reason. It's very scenic and peaceful. This will immediately affect my property value, which is not going to immediately be offset by my tax rate, as you all know.
Today we have an answer that makes sense for our environment, our economy, and our community, the Webster Solar Garden Project. This project isn't just about being green, but it's about common sense.
There should not be a vote on this before all of the proper procedures are followed. This has to go to the planning board first. And so there should not be a vote on it tonight. If there is going to be a vote on it tonight, you should vote no.
And it's important to say this clearly. It wasn't one-sided. For many of the topics, there was strong opposition, but there was also voices saying we need progress. We can't sell everything. I'm for this. And that balance matters because this isn't about just one issue in our town. It's about a community, all of us, trying to figure out how it wants to grow and who gets to shape that process. So we're not left later wondering, what did we turn our town into? For years, the conversation was, why don't more people participate? That's not what it is at this moment in time. This is a shift. But the bigger question becomes, and the harder question, what happens next? Showing up matters. But does it change the outcome? Do concerns raised in that room show up in revisions, delays, and reconsiderations? Or are decisions continued down the same path, just with more voices surrounding them? Now, that's not a criticism. It's a measurement question to think about. Because if participation that we want is going to mean something long-term, it has to connect to the impact. Otherwise, people burn out. And when that happens, trust erodes. That's why it's so important for us to stay engaged and to pay attention and then eventually to come out and vote. So here's the takeaway. You should feel proud of what you saw last week. But now we need to level it up together. Not just showing up, but tracking what actually changes because you showed up. Right now, something truly interesting is happening. Residents are asking for more time, more clarity, better answers. But the real question is whether decisions are actually slowing down with that or continuing on the same timeline. Your job, keep showing up. Start paying attention to outcomes, not just because what was said, but what changed after you said it. Because it feels like things are still moving too fast. You're not imagining it. So let's get into some specifics. Now, here's what that practice actually looks like. Some patterns are subtle, as they say, and sometimes they're quite obvious. So if you want to understand that tension between how fast decisions move and how much time is given to understand it, this is it. At the recent town board meeting, the town board was presented with a 73-page contract with multiple third parties that was delivered around 1 p.m. on the same day it was voted on. And during the discussion, there was some actually open admissions that not everyone, most people, hadn't read it, not even skimmed it, not reviewed key sections, just hadn't read it. Alex, have you read this, all 73 pages?
No.
Okay. Yeah, that happened. But that's not the same as personally understanding what you're voting on. Now, later with this contract, it was revealed that major legal issues had to be worked out in this agreement, as it involved the village, the town, and other third parties. And none of this was known to the board before the vote. But now the question becomes, might sound simple. If the information isn't reviewed at all, how confident can anyone be in the decision that's being made? Now, this wasn't an emergency vote. The village had to vote on it a week later, and it could have been delayed till the next board meeting. It would have meant 1 week delay, 7 days, to allow the board time to read, ask questions, understand what's going on. Instead, it moved forward. Alex and Nick, the town supervisor and deputy town supervisor, and Jennifer voted for it, and John Cahill and myself voted against it. And this is where the pace becomes the story. Because it's not just what gets decided, it's how fast decisions are expected to move compared to how much time is given to understand them. And that's the rub that people are reacting to. It's not just the outcomes. It's definitely outcomes. But the speed relative to the scrutiny and the time to ask questions. And yes, local government can move fast, but difficulty doesn't change the standard that we want our elected officials in our town to operate with. Whether you vote on something complex or simple, that vote carries legal, financial, and community impacts for everybody that lives here. We've got to all deal with the consequences together, if they're bad or if they're good. So there's the takeaway. If reading becomes optional, and if understanding becomes optional, trust becomes optional too. We got to pay attention to the agendas. When documents show up, ask why they were released and whether there was time to review them. Because accountability doesn't start with a vote. It begins way before it. And that leads to our very important next question. What's supposed to happen? All right, so if that's what fast decision making look like, that's easy, right? It begs the question, what is a standard that boards are supposed to meet? I want to talk about something simple that actually matters a lot. What is a town board member or any member of any board supposed to do before they vote? I know that might sound obvious, but given where we're at, I think it's worth walking through so everyone can be on the same page. And if you ask most people, they probably say, I assume they read the materials. This isn't Congress where, we're worried they're not doing stuff. And that's a fair assumption. I had that assumption. But from a government standpoint, whether it's a town board, a nonprofit, or any decision-making body, there's something that's called the duty of care. In plain English, that means you're expected to understand what you're voting on. That includes reviewing materials, asking questions, understanding risks, and making sure the decision is based on a complete record. That means legal review if there's a lawyer part of it, and board members still need to review it themselves. And it's not just about moving things along, because legally, decisions have to have what's called a rational basis, meaning they're grounded in information in front of them, and that only works if the information is actually reviewed. That sounds a little crazy. Now, there's always pressure to move things quickly. Projects, timelines, deadlines, those are real. But speed and understanding are not the same thing. They can be opposing forces. It's a balancing act. And this is the core tension you'll hear us talk about again and again tonight. The pace of decisions versus the depth of understanding, high or low, behind them. Speed's not the issue. Anybody can be fast. It becomes an issue when decisions move forward before understanding catches up, especially when those decisions can protect the town. Now, and I'm going to say this. I don't think reading the documents should ever go out of style when anyone's making decisions that affect residents at the local, the county, the state, or the national level. The standard's pretty simple. It starts with understanding what you're voting on. And at the end of the day, this isn't about process for process sake. It's about making sure decisions are thoughtful, informed, and actually in the best interest of the community. Because if we're to talk about leadership or transparency, radical transparency, then the doing the work has to be part of that. Because you can't be transparent and just say, I didn't read it, I can't comment. And that's where trust comes from, not speed, but knowing the decision was understood before it was made. So, given that background, the next question becomes, what does it look like in real situations? Not just in theory or definition, but an active project with real impact on the community for the next 30 plus years. So let's apply it to something real. The Xerox Solar Project. It's a large-scale project with long-term impact that's still ongoing. And recently, the town board took a vote on this project. And here's what's important to understand about that vote. The project was approved with conditions by a majority of the board. Specifically, Alex, Nick, and Jennifer voted in favor of it, while others, John Cale and myself, voted against it. More specifically, what was approved was an industrial use permit with two key conditions. A host community agreement and a bond decommission agreement still need to be worked out. And those conditions matter because even with the approval, there's still items that aren't complete, that need more work. So this wasn't a clean, fully resolved approval. It was a move forward with open pieces still in play. And that's where things get a little more complicated. Because it raises the question, was everyone really understood what was going on? Is it a series of decisions happening time and time again while information is still evolving and changing? And there's unresolved conditions, substantive pieces that are still incomplete, areas where analysis is limited, including seasonal gaps like leaf-on versus leaf-on visualization studies that can change this impact on the town forever. Those are important. We've seen changes in reported impacts, like sound going from 0 to 42 decibels. And that's not extreme, but it's also not nothing. So the question becomes, was earlier information incomplete, or is newer data more accurate? Is stuff still being figured out? And time to do this right is important, or it's not? And that's that rub versus speed versus process and asking questions. There was an opportunity here to slow things down and let more information come into focus. But that didn't happen. Now, to be clear, none of this automatically means the project is wrong. That's not the point. The point is about the process and all of you. When you combine incomplete information, changing data, and continued forward movement, you start to see a pattern where understanding is still catching up to decisions being made. And decision being made just to get it off their plate to make life easier. So ask yourself, is this built on a full understanding? Or is understanding still in progress while decisions move forward we can undo later? Because once something like this thing moves forward, it's hard to rewind it back. And this is where that concept we trust comes in, not speed, clarity. If people feel like they haven't seen enough yet, that matters. Or maybe it doesn't. And that's the choice the residents get to decide. That's your role. Stay engaged. Watch how things evolve. Because what happens next matters just as much as what's already happened in the past. And sometimes confusion isn't about wrongdoing. It's about a communication breakdown that needs to be solved. Now, before we wrap this up, there's one thing worth clarifying. Because not everything that feels fast actually is. The Verizon cell tower at Mill Creek, Imperial Drive, is still in progress. It hasn't completed the approval cycle yet, and it's really just at the start. It's got to go through its whole process. And that last time board meeting was just the baby step one, right? Step one, not the final step, not the full approval, the beginning of a series of decisions that will shape what's going to happen. So there's more time for input. There's more time for negotiation and compromise and talking about it. And we're going to walk through this in much more detail in a future episode. Because understanding that process really matters because residents care deeply about what's going on there. So why does it feel final? Why do people feel like it was being decided? Well, because communication wasn't clear. And when people don't understand the process, they assume the worst, rightly so. And this is important because the issue isn't speed, it's visibility. So here's the takeaway. Know where something actually stands, not just what you heard or what it feels like. Follow the process. Ask questions, not dig past the headlines, because that's where your voice still matters so much. And just to give you a sense of where this could be heading, at the planning board meeting, Tony Kashani indicated that he's leaning towards this project might not get approved. So there's a lot of stuff to still happen. Stay tuned. All right. Your voice is being heard. All right, folks. And after all that, it's worth zooming out. You know what? We're coming out of winter. Thank you. Parks are filling up. The grass is getting greener. People are outside. And we're finally getting that first stretch of real spring. And that's a reminder that for all of us, how decisions get made and how fast they make shape our town. The places you walk, the community you feel a part of. So yes, stay engaged, but also enjoy it. Enjoy the springtime. The bridge is up and that means it's springtime. Whether you're for or against the bridge, it still means springtime is here. At the end of the day, that part matters. Because Webster, we're at a moment right now. Because of the pace of decisions and the responses we're seeing from the residents, we can tell you're worried. People are showing up. People are concerned about what's going on in our town, and that matters. Participation has to connect to outcomes, to decisions people feel they can trust, right? That's what they want. This isn't about slowing things down just to slow it down. It's about making sure the pace of decisions matches the level of understanding the community, all of you, deserves. And that's how you build slow and real trust. So keep doing what you're doing. Stay engaged. Keep asking questions. Keep paying attention, not just to what gets decided, but to how decisions are actually made. Because this is your community. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, following, or sharing it with a fellow Webster resident. The more we spread the information, the more informed all of our community comes. And as always, every step we take is a step towards a better Webster.
You've been watching Webster Now with Garrett Wagner. Join us next time for more local news and updates.